I'm Nancy. This is Tim. We've been married coming up on 24 years.
Well, we've been married 24 years. We've got a son that's 22 and a daughter that's 20. Jeff, my son, is in San Diego, and Kaylee is still here in Tulsa, going to TCC. I retired from the police department after 35 years for the Tulsa Police Department. That's why I look as old as I do, because cops age in dog years. So I'm really 450 years old, and I don't think I look too bad for 450. But
I'm a lawyer by vocation. I have worked with the same firm for over 25 years, doing business law.
Yeah, I like to tell that story. You know, in police work and any other work, you go to gain respect for people, and when you see honorable men, it really makes a difference. And so I had the pleasure of working with Jeff Felton actually he worked for me for quite a few years, and then I happened to see him out at the Maybe Center after I'd retired, and I said, "What are you doing out here?" And they were serving, and so coming from serving what? What do you mean? He said, "Well, it's our church is serving," and so I asked him about the church and where it was, because we were between churches or looking at churches and visiting other places at the time for various and sundry reasons, and but so he introduced me to the church, and it was one big advantage was, besides what I saw what I liked, and it wasn't just Jeff, of course, it was several of the members from community South Community Church were there and serving at that particular event. So it wasn't just him, but it was several, and I was impressed with that. And at the time we were meeting, the church was meeting at Spirit Center, and it was like 2 blocks from my house. It's like, yes, I'd like that, being close. So anyway, that's how we got introduced to it, by the work of a good man.
Well, a couple of things, because you can hardly not learn something from James, but the whole thing about faith and deeds. One thing that really struck me this time going through James was when he was talking about Abraham, and Abraham being willing to sacrifice Isaac, and how it says something about how when you act on your faith becomes complete, or something along those lines. And that kind of struck me, because that wasn't a deed that we think of like deeds, like I'm going to go out and help somebody. He was actually, and really what it spoke to me was, our deeds are trusting God and acting on our faith. And that is a huge message to me, because I tend to doubt and to worry, and even not want to hope. But my deed would be acting on my faith and trusting God and having hope in His Word. So that's what James really spoke to me this time.
And I think one of my, when we've done the analysis of our gifts and things, one of my gifts is faith, and so it's not, I don't have the same struggles to figure everything out. It's like, okay, whatever, it's where we feel led. But and what James always makes me struggle with every time I ever pick it up, because sometimes I hate to pick it up, but it always punches at you. Are you doing enough? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And I think, reading this morning in John about the Jesus healing the guy by the pool. Been there 38 years, and we would like to stir the water for that person who needs to be healed.
At one of my low points, spiritually, I guess, you know, the whole doubting and stuff. Anyway, we read that story in Sunday school. But before we even got there, I had looked at it, and you know, the paralytic, Jesus said, you know, do you want to get well? And I had struggled with the same thing for so long. And that, do you want to get well, Nancy? And the paralytic answered with, well, you know, there's people going in front of me and I don't get there on time. And that, I'm not saying that that's how he said it, but I always had reasons why I wasn't getting victory. And that just pierced my heart. Do you want to get well? And that was really a turning point for me.
Children, you know, our kids are practically grown, and our church has prayed for them, and both of them, and our son, especially in San Diego, kind of trying to make it on his own, and some spiritual struggles that we worried about, and he knows that people are praying for him, and there's been some direct, almost instantaneous answered prayer in those regards. And so you know, we worry about him, you know, going too far away, but we're pretty confident that he's going to make his choices, and he's got the basis to make those choices. So I guess if I was going to try to encourage somebody about their kids, it's like, just keep speaking the word to them, and then it's up to God.
My name is Chris Roberts. I'm 24 years old. I've been attending SCC for about 2 years now, and I am a full-time student at ORU. I first found out about FCC when my roommate Kyle knew Pastor Kenny and just suggested that we go to church. What kept me coming back to SCC was a genuine community. Like, it wasn't confrontational, it was just genuine love and care about a person. Going through the series in James 2:17, which was faith without works is dead. And that hit me so hard that when we did a project at school, it was called a conspiracy of kindness, and that showed us that even the smallest things that you put into action with faith is good works. Through the last 2 years at SCC, God has matured me greatly. It's no longer just an immature aspect of God, but it was more of living for God. Like, God called me out of a decent job and decent pay to just call to ministry, go to school, and to be a youth pastor. And God has given me the opportunity to go to ORU and to learn about Him and to show the kids especially what God can do. And if you are obedient, then God will provide. And that was just the biggest aspect that I've had to learn. And though tough, it's been great to be surrounded by SCC and loving people to encourage you, to build you up, as God has called us to do. And that has been the biggest aspect that I've learned so far. If there was an instance where God calls you to be obedient, you need to submit. For instance, there was a story where I just lost my car, it got repossessed, I had very little money because there was no job, and someone told me that they needed to talk to me. And when they talked to me, they told me that I was sufficient, that God would provide for me, and I had no worries. And then 2 seconds later, out of his pocket, he handed me an envelope with $200 in it that said, "I love you, God loves you, and it will all be okay." No matter what the instance is, no matter how hard it is, just be obedient, because he will provide. He does care and love for us greatly, that we should just obey.
All right, I'm Jake Fisher. This is my wife, Brittany, and we've been married 3 years tomorrow, actually, so 3 years. Well, currently, my job right now actually is just studying. I'm a medical student, so it takes up a lot of my time.
I work as a publicist for a PR firm here in Tulsa, so yeah, that's kind of my day job, but mainly I just try to support him as he's studying and doing the med school thing, because it's a lot of hard work.
All right, well, what brought us to Tulsa and to SCC initially is whenever I was applying to medical school, we kind of looked basically all over the country where I wanted to go, and really at the top of my list was OSU here in Tulsa. And so whenever we knew that this is where I wanted to go and where we wanted to, I guess, plant some roots for at least a little while, at least 4 years, we were really excited about it because we knew Ashley and Jameson really well. And they had just started up this new church, SCC, and so it was really great because we already knew people in the area, and we already were kind of plugged into a church when pretty much before we even got here. So that's pretty much how we came to SCC.
Well, and it was pretty perfect. We actually even came to SCC before we even had really looked at OSU as a medical school. Just coming up for fun, Ashley and I were in high school together, so we had come up just to visit Jameson and Ashley after they made the move up here, just to have a fun weekend. So, and see Aniston when she was still in diapers, which is crazy. So, yeah, it was just a lot of fun. We got to meet the church, everyone at the church, and I remember from day one, Kenny coming up to us, and we kind of mentioned that, you know, there could be potential that we could move up here at some point for medical school, you know, down the road. And I remember Kenny day one was like, well, I'm praying that he gets into OSU so you guys can be here. And he would say that every time he saw me, every time we visited, because we probably visited every, 4 to 6 months after that, periodically. So every time he would tell us, and his prayers were answered. I think with this series on James, the specific week that stuck out the most to us, and we've talked about it a lot even before we knew we were going to do this, but we both are kind of PKs. I grew up in the church. My dad's a music minister. My grandparents were missionaries for like 30 years, and so I grew up really heavily involved in the church and as somebody that was a staff's kid. And then Jake, his dad's the senior pastor at a church, and he grew up in that kind of position as well. And so we've kind of, as a result, seen like the absolute best of the church and the worst of the church. And in doing that, this week that I was really encouraged by was talking about partiality in the church, and that can be, we've seen firsthand, that can be something really dangerous that just tears apart a church. And we were really encouraged just to hear about some of the, I guess, guardrails, Kenny will like that I said that Kenny kind of has set up, and just our church leadership has set up, so that's not an issue at SCC, and that's something we'd noticed anyways, but even hearing it specifically was just really encouraging to us.
Okay, well, for me, this past year has been, I guess, quite a bit of an adjustment. Of course, starting medical school. I have not been to medical school before, so I have no previous experience with this, but it's been a big adjustment just for me as a person. Something as simple as time management, but what it really gets down to is medical school and just the rigors of just my schedule and just the time that I have available for all the rest of life outside of medical school is limited, but it really, I guess it points out, in a good way, but sometimes in a bad way, I guess, but it points out really where your priorities are and what's important to you. And so whenever things happen in life, you know, I mean, you don't have time to just sit around and do nothing. You really have to, I guess, get your priorities right and devote the time where it's needed and where it's supposed to be. And so for me, this past year has been, I mean, it's been a roller coaster ride, and it's definitely been tough, but there's been a lot of growth also this past year for me individually. I know there's been a lot of growth and just a lot of life experience, things God has taught us as a couple and as a family.
Yeah, it's definitely the medical school experience, which I think we have a couple people in the church that have been through that before, was definitely going into it. I spoke to a lot of other wives that had husbands go through medical school and basically told me it was like the worst experience of their lives and my life was going to be terrible and I would never see my husband. And so moving here, needless to say, I was a little bit terrified and scared. And honestly, just from the way God has carried us through that has been amazing. And a lot of that has been the discipline that Jake has had to study and still spend time with us and make family a priority. But I mean, specifically, especially, I saw that this last fall, we kind of decided over the summer, probably, we both were kind of really feeling God kind of have a call to us to be parents. And so over the summer, I kind of talked to Jake a lot about that because I really felt convicted that waiting for convenience sake wasn't the right thing when really I was feeling called to be a mom and us called to be parents kind of more than anything, above any career I could ever do. So we decided to start trying, and within a couple months we're pregnant, which was super exciting for us. And about everything was going pretty well, and about 7 or 8 weeks in the pregnancy I started having some complications and basically got put on bed rest. And after about a month of bed rest and ultrasounds and bad news and more bad news and then a little glimmer of hope and then more bad news, I kind of had a crazy pregnancy. We ended up having a miscarriage at 11 weeks in November. And so it was really hard. That was definitely one of the hardest things I think we've ever been through, obviously, since we've been married. But one of the most encouraging things to me, and I remember telling people this, is that Jake was Jesus to me during that time in so many ways, on top of all the friends and everything else that we had and support from family. But he was here. I really expected, and my expectations even going through that was that he'd be studying, and I wasn't going to hold grudges if he had to study and not be able to be around. And he made it a priority to be here for me every single night and every day and at every appointment, whether it meant skipping lab or skipping class, and made those arrangements and still did well in school. And so how he pulled that off, I mean, that was God's provision, I think. But
it depends on your definition of well.
he did well. So, you know, that all being said, we, our DNC for the pregnancy after all of our crazy complications and everything was November 14th, and exactly 3 months to the day later, on Valentine's Day, we actually found out that we are expecting again. So we're really excited. We're due at the very end of October, which doesn't really mean a lot to me because I expect the baby to probably be late, so probably more November-ish. But anyways, sometime this fall, hopefully we will have a wonderful, healthy baby, and you can be in prayer for us over that.
My name is Eric Anthony.
And I'm Carrie Anthony. And we have 2 children, Cameron and Peyton.
I'm a stay-at-home dad.
And I'm an obstetrician gynecologist. We've been in Tulsa for 2 years now, and about 1.5 years ago we started looking for churches. We actually saw a sign in the grass in front of Chick-fil-A on Memorial, and we saw the sign for SCC. I told Eric that we should take a look at that church because it seemed like it might be a smaller church, and that's really what we were looking for. We had been to a few mega churches, and we are originally from Atlanta, and we went to a mega church in Atlanta, and we wanted something smaller. So Eric took the kids one Sunday to service, and the rest is history. Afterwards, he told me, this is the church, this is where we're going, and we've been there ever since.
The thing that keeps us coming to SCC is the fact that it's a small church, and people go out of their way to be friendly to you, and they've been friendly to our family. They've made us feel welcome from day one. Our children are involved with the children's ministry, and we've gotten ourselves plugged in and gotten involved. And by getting involved, the people that we've encountered, they become like a second family to us. Being as though we're from Atlanta, we don't have any immediate family here, and SCC has, or the people at SCC have become the family that we miss back at home in Atlanta. As parents, the thing that has spoken to me in James is the section or the chapters that talk about your mouth and your tongue, and how the tongue is the smallest part of your body, but it controls the entire body. And as parents, I have to continually remind myself that we have to speak positive reinforcement over our children and speak the things that we would want to see in their lives.
I think for me, the part in James that spoke the most was about being judgmental, and also about not boasting about tomorrow without recognizing that God is in control of your tomorrow. So I think that message spoke the most to me, because a lot of times we'll make plans and we'll talk about the things that we want to do and the things that we're going to do without really acknowledging that tomorrow is not promised to you. So it's helped us to try to think about God's will when we start talking about the things that we're going to do, because we want to continuously be walking in His will. So instead of just saying, this is what we're going to do and this is where we're going to go, if it's God's will, then this is what we'll do. I think that part touched me the most. One of the challenges that we have been experiencing is dealing with a teen and preteen. I'm sure that those of you who have raised your children or are in the process of raising those teens and tweens, you know how challenging it could be, especially with the rebellious spirit of teenagers, because they are wanting to do things their way and they want things the way that they want them. And Eric and I recently went away on a trip, just the two of us, and during that trip we prayed about better ways that we could communicate and become closer to the kids. And we felt like God really spoke to us when we were away. It was great to be away from the kids, to have some time to really focus, not in the heat of the moment or not when we were really frustrated. And to tell you the truth, we both felt like we were at the end of our ropes. We really felt like we were up against the wall and really didn't have any clarity on how to make things better and what we could do to be better parents, to communicate and bridge the gap. But God really spoke to us, and we felt like He just gave us some ideas to try to relate to our kids on their level, instead of trying to make them to relate to us on the adult level. Examples of that, playing video games. The teen loves to play video games. So we realized that quality time can be the adults playing video games with the teenager, playing what the teenager wants to play. Watching The Walking Dead or, any other shows that we probably might not have watched on our own, but quality time can actually be the family sitting and watching a show like that, of course, age appropriate. But those things, we came home and we did, and we felt refreshed, and we actually feel like our family's moving in a positive direction. We feel like we're communicating much better, and the attitudes are better in the house, and we feel like each member of the family enjoys spending time with the other members. And I just really feel like that took prayer, and it was a week of just praying and asking and telling God to speak to us and to show us and touch our hearts and show us where we needed to make changes. And those changes I don't think I would have made without hearing God's Spirit speak to me. I just don't know that I would want to sit down and watch certain shows, but they actually were pretty good.